so that you can view this session later if you'd like to. And I'm going to start the recording a little bit sooner than what we might normally do. And that's because today's session is all about getting things started and getting things off right with your students. So I'm going to be doing things a little bit differently, beginning with having this slide 1 recording start here. So just to kind of check in, I know because of our previous chat that everyone can hear me okay. But just to make sure that when I turned on my microphone this last time that everybody can hear me, give me an okay in the text chat area if you can hear. Everything okay? I want to make sure everybody is comfortable. Excellent. Amanda, you have your hand raised. You might be just signaling that you can hear. Let me know if you do have a question though. Great. Okay, so again, I talked about how I'm going to be modeling a lot of the practices that we're going to talk about this afternoon. And in some ways, I'm going to go overboard a little bit on that. And so one of the things that I'd like to start with is, in your online course, one of the things that you want to make sure of right from the start is that your students are comfortable. So I wanted to make sure that you were all comfortable with the technology that we're going to be using in this webinar. Just to kind of introduce the webinar, it's on Quality Online Course Series, Getting Students Started. And this particular experience aligns with the Quality Matters Standard number 1. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means, what Quality Matters mean, and what the standard is. We already went through this exercise, but from the perspective of what it means to get things started, you want to make sure that if you're doing an online session like this with your students, that they can hear you and they have a way to communicate with you. So that's something that you might want to add to your own slides. If you're doing a live synchronous session in your online course, even before you sort of dive into the content, it's kind of important, especially the first couple times that you might do a live session like this, again, to have them comfortable with the technology. And then helping them learn a little bit more about how the Collaborate interface works. And we always start our workshops, online workshops, off with these things, just again, so that people aren't anxious about the technology, that they can actually focus on the content being delivered. So here again are some of the popular tools, having students be able to use the chat panel, and also being able to add some things into the message area. Usually gets things started. If you're using Blackboard Collaborate for your online course, it's always a good idea to also set up your camera and microphone and add a photo to of yourself in there. It just gives it a more personalized approach if you have some kind of photograph. Really, whether you use the web camera or not. I'm not using the web camera this afternoon, mostly because my face talking in the corner can be distracting, but also I want to make sure that our connection stays solid. And sometimes when you introduce things like video, it can kind of use up those airways. So unless I feel like kind of seeing my face is going to be beneficial, I'll probably keep the webcam off. So like we would do in an online course or an online live class, I always like to start off by getting to know everyone. And part of how we're going to get to know each other is I'm going to talk a little bit more about myself. It's completely up to you how you introduce yourself to your students, but this is just one idea. It's a little bit more informal than maybe a really formalized kind of professional introduction. So you can go really professional, really formal, or you can go a little bit more casual like this. I like to be a little bit more casual because I put my personality into my courses. I put my personality into online workshops. So this is something that you can add to your online course, just as that kind of getting to know you with your students. I saw Billows arrived. I'm glad to see you this afternoon. And I also see that Kim is joining us. So I'm going to pause for just a second to get everybody sort of in here. The Husky bus was late. Oh no. Kim, welcome to the session. I hope you can hear us. We are having a bit of a text chat conversation in the text chat area, and I can see you found it, and you can hear me, which is great news. We were just talking about when you are getting your students started in an online course, first thing you want to do is sort of get to know each other. And so we've been talking about how you want them to get to know you a little bit more, and this screen here is one of those possibilities. So I've added sort of a casual picture of myself here. I've added my contact information, where I received my master's from, some of my academic interests, but I've also added some personal information that I don't mind sharing with the course. Again, it's all up to you on how much information, what type of information you share, but it just gives the class an idea about who you are, and if you have similar interests, it might be something that helps you connect with your students. For instance, I state here that I grew up in New England. So if someone else grew up in New England or recently visited New England, or was thinking about how all the fall foliage is now falling off the trees due to the snow. This is getting that connection with your students kind of moving along. Please introduce yourself now. I want to get to know a little bit about you. If you can just add in the text chat area your name, department, and your experience with online teaching. And I see Lacey's joined us, so I believe you've been to sessions before, but if you are trying to figure out where the text chat is, that is at the bottom of the screen. There are some purple arrows that will open up the box, and then at the very bottom is kind of that text chat bubble that you can click on, and then finally there's an area that will say something, and you can add your chat there. So Autumn says she's with the Department of Geography, and she's been teaching an online class for about a year. Great. Amanda is in the History and Center for Study of Women, Gender, and Sexuality. Zero experience with online teaching, but you're starting your first class in January. Okay, so I'm glad you're attending the webinar. Definitely point out some of the other resources for you if you're starting a class in January, but I'd also invite you to get in contact with me if you want to go over strategy, or you need to think about anything getting ready for that January class. Kim is a registered dietitian and new to online teaching this upcoming semester. So same advice, please reach out to me if you'd like more help in getting things moving, and also looking at our resources. Lisa's with the Department of Psychology, no online classes, just web enhanced courses. I think you will find some of these tips also beneficial. they definitely do help with regular classes, even if they're not very digitally or web enhanced, like you said. Bill is in music, and he uses online teaching in conjunction with various classes, so a blended approach. All very good, kind of different levels of experience, which is great. If you do want to talk, then you can just click on that sort of old-fashioned microphone icon that's at the bottom of the page. But what I would say in general is that if you can mute your microphone button, that has sort of two benefits to it. One is we don't necessarily hear if you suddenly have this crazy cough going on in your office, and the other one is just so we're not sort of talking over each other. But again, if you do have a question and you'd like to use your microphone, just let me know and I'll concede the floor to you. So some of my expectations are what workshop etiquette that I'm going to be looking for this afternoon starts off with what we were just talking about. If you could raise your hand to ask a question, the raise your hand icon is center bottom. It looks kind of like a little hand. And then again, I can concede the mic to you. And then click the talk button when you are asked to volunteer. That way, again, we're not talking over each other. You can certainly converse via the text chat at any time. I will definitely keep my eye on what is happening in the text chat area. I'll also be repeating a lot of what you are saying in the text chat area, and that's just for the recording because the text chat feature is not part of the recording. So that helps that viewer kind of understand what was going in the text chat area. A couple kind of fun little things we can use in the text chat area. If you are speaking to someone specifically, you can use the @ sign and their name to, again, indicate that you're responding to a particular person. And then if you just sort of agree with somebody, then you could use a +1. Kind of speeds up the text chat sometimes. Some of the tips for success that I think will really help this online workshop go well is to first minimize any distractions you have around you. If you have the opportunity to shut your office door or something like that, you can really focus in on what's going on in our session this afternoon. Don't worry about taking notes because, again, this recording will be available to you, and you can always go back and review. If there's something that you didn't quite remember what I suggested, feel free to go ahead and look at that recording. Feel free to ask questions and to answer each other. That might be that opportunity to use that @ symbol, or if someone asks a question and you feel like you can provide the answer to it, just go ahead and do that. And then I will be stopping at different times to really ask you about your thoughts and ideas. I'm really asking because I want to know them. Every time I do one of these workshops, as part of my preparation, I actually watch the old recording, and I often find some interesting tidbits, questions that people ask that are ideas that they shared, and it really helps enhance the workshop every time. I'm just pausing for just a moment to make sure that I have everyone as attended, and it looks like we're good to go. So my workshop objectives for today is that that you'll be able to understand the importance of introducing a course to your students. You're going to help your students feel connected. You're going to help them understand the purpose and the structure of an online course. That might be a little bit different than maybe something that you've done in a face-to-face course, but I think it's really important. And then you want to make sure that your students are You give them everything that they need to be successful in the course. So I've already been modeling some of these objectives in the way that I've introduced this particular webinar. But let me go deeper into how that might look and feel in an online course. So we all have experience as a instructor, as a faculty member, maybe even a student in a face-to-face course. So what do you do the first day in a face-to-face class? And you can add your comments to the text chat area. And I'll just pause briefly as you're sort of starting to add your comments into the text chat area. Bill does introductions between his students and himself. Autumn goes over the syllabus, does introductions. Amanda does introductions, goes over the syllabus, discusses the students' assumptions about the goal, about the goals of the course. Oh, I love that. This is going to fit in really well with what I said about that, the purpose of the course being really clear. So here are some of the things that we've sort of come up with that we think that will happen typically in a first day activity. Lacey introduces herself, has students introduce themselves, cover key policy, key assignments, reason for the course, organization and flow. Yes, those are all good things, and those are things that we're going to go over today on how you can do that in an online course. So I think we've covered most of these first day activities. We're all doing similar things. I think Lacey kind of covered it at the end here where she said she was covering key policies and key assignments, and those are all great first day activities. So what I'm here to suggest is that online courses are no different. You will still need to kind of create all of those first day activities for your students. The purpose of the course should be in line with course objectives. Sorry, got cut off. No problem. That was a really good point. That definitely everything should tie back to those course objectives. So when you're thinking about all of these getting started first day kind of activities, you sort of want to look at it from the student's perspective. What would happen if your students went into your course, your online course, that first day? What are they sort of looking for? And they're probably looking for the what, when, whys, and how. How is this course organized? How are they going to navigate around? Where are they going to find those key components? Similar to what Lacey was talking about, you know, those key assignments and everything. How are they going to move about in this course? And then also, what is this going to be like? How are they going to connect with other students? How are they're going to connect with students, but also how are the concepts going to connect with each other, and how are they going to relate to each other? These are some of the things that the students are anxious about, especially if it's their first online course. And so we want to make sure that we really help them with these things. Now, Quality Matters calls this the WAN acronym because it's organizing, navigating, and establishing. So just a little shortcut to help you remember what the students might be feeling when they first get into an online course. So here are some principles for introducing a course to your students. And this is where we're going to get really practical about some things that you can do to start things off right. But why do we want the students to have some kind of course introduction? And it's going to help them to connect, but it's also going to let them know that you care about them right from the start, that this is still, even though it's an online course, it's still a course that has a human being behind it. It's going to help them understand the purpose and the goals of the course We talked about that a little bit. You know, what are your goals for the course, and possibly what your students' goals are for the course. A course introduction also helps students understand the structure and flow of the course. They're going to understand it more and more as it sort of unfolds, but it's going to really help if you introduce some of these things right from the beginning. Set expectations for the students. Students will definitely be more likely to meet your expectations if you let them know what they are. And of course, to help them be successful in the course. That is really what it all comes down to, is how to help our students be more successful in the course. So how are we going to get students to connect? Well, we want them to connect with us. So this diagram is sort of showing that. There's a two-way connection between the faculty and the students. And we also want them to be able to connect with each other. One of the ways we can help them connect with the course is to provide a welcoming and informative page. You can change this to be your course entry page. By default, Blackboard will have them go to the announcement page, but this is another opportunity, at least in the first couple weeks of the course, to have them look at this welcome page when they first enter Blackboard. And here's some things. There's a lot of information on this page, but try to be sort of short and succinct so it's not sort of overwhelming. So I like to start with the course description. That could be the description right out of the catalog. It almost tells them that they're in the right place when they enter the course. And then there's some getting started activities. So they know, almost like a checklist. If they view the information posted in the course content, they download the syllabus, they review the units, and they look at the materials and reading resources. It's going to start them off and, okay, this is sort of going to take me to that next most important page that's going to give them a lot of information. I'm going to slide over to this other kind of column here. And this is to let them know if there are any date and time specific class sessions, whether it be a face-to-face meeting. A lot of, you talked about being web enhanced or blended. This will let them know if there are specific dates and times and places for a face-to-face meeting. Excuse me. Or if there's a synchronous message. Sorry, I just had a huge cough. Usually I don't start coughing until at least 45 minutes in. But again, letting them know when those times and dates are so they can mark them off on their calendar right away and let you, their attendance will be better if you kind of get on their calendar sooner rather than later. Also some contact information. Again, just you might add that to your instructor page too, but that'll give them some quick information if they want to reach out and have some questions for you. This note on the bottom is usually pretty good too, and that's your preferred method to be contacted. So they go sort of to that communication channel first. Bopping over to the other side again, I like to add the course learning objectives. I try to focus on the course learning objectives, and it gives them a really easy way to know where that focus is going to be. And then I also add our ADA statement here. If students do have a need for accommodations, that's something that they can find really quickly and easily. So it's something that I like to put sort of right at the front of the course. Here's a different way, or maybe an additional way that you could welcome your students, and that's through your instructor page. similar to what I did earlier when I was introducing myself, there's a variety of different things that you could share with your students, and we're going to go over some of the ideas that you could add in there. In this particular one, this is our director's introduction. Jason Rohde, he teaches a few classes in ETRA, and he uses a video introduction. And don't click on the button. This is just a screenshot. It's not going to work if you click on it. But it's just to show you how you can embed a video like this into your introduction. So not only are the students reading about you, but they're kind of seeing your personality in this video. This is another idea on how I've done an introduction, a little bit more formal than the introduction that I did at the beginning of this workshop. Again, just giving you another idea how you might want to introduce yourself. I've also added my role in here. What I feel like my role is in the course, how I kind of approach teaching. In this case, I talk about being a facilitator and a coach throughout the course. I also talk about my role in monitoring the discussions, but not necessarily responding to each post. I try to have the students respond to each other a little bit more. Again, that's just my approach, but I'm letting them know so they're not sort of waiting for me to respond to them. I also, if I do respond, it's usually to challenge them or to steer the conversation possibly back to the content at hand. Sometimes they can go off on a little bit of a tangent, so I try to keep them focused. In this introduction, I also let them know how they can communicate with me if they have a question in the discussion forum. And that my commitment to them is to respond to them within 24 hours. That's my commitment. It doesn't have to be yours. Sometimes it really depends on the length of a course. The quicker the course is, usually your turnaround time has to be a little quicker. 48 hours, I think, is a typical response time that I've seen. But I also let them know if they have any questions that are of a more private nature to email me. So again, a couple different ways you can introduce yourself to your students, but to allow them to introduce and start to get to know each other amongst the students, a discussion board's a pretty typical activity to do that. So you can use a getting to know you discussion board. It's usually not graded. Sometimes you can add a few points to it just to kind of motivate them to participate in a getting to know you discussion. But you can really kind of get creative with these getting to know you discussions, icebreaker discussions they could be called to. In this case, we've asked the students to identify 3 identities that they have. So 3 different ways that they see themselves, and maybe add some sort of symbol of that identity. This is kind of a fun one. You can share this with your students. This fall semester, I had my students do 2 truths and a lie. So they had to add 3 things about themselves, and 2 were to be true and 1 was to be a lie. And then the other students were sort of guessing which one was the lie. And it was really quite interesting. I had, I think, over 300 posts to that discussion board because they just had way too much fun with it. So before I transition over to the purpose and goals of the course, if anybody would like to share what they've done to kind of, as a getting to know you activity, I'd love to hear about it. But again, to segue into the purpose and goals of the course, some of the ways that you can do that is, you know what, just be really obvious about it. If you want to talk about what the purpose of the course is, add into your information area, add into your first module somewhere, just tell them what you think the purpose of the course is. It's going to be a little bit different than the description because it may have to do with where it fits in their sequence. It may be more of a life skill that you're giving to them. Talking about my course this fall, it fit into one of the pathways. So maybe you can talk about which learning pathway this course relates to. Amanda said she has an icebreaker where she asks students something to share something about themselves that is not obvious at first glance. Yes, sort of something something nobody knows about me, you know, and at a certain level. I really like that's a good idea. I'm thinking about it. I'm pausing a little bit because I'm thinking about it from the perspective of an online course. And so one of the things that I've done too is had the students use their Blackboard profile. And when they do that, they add a picture of themselves to Blackboard, and it always shows up in their discussion posts, but it also allows them to identify their major and add something about you know, maybe an activity that they're involved in. And so it might be kind of interesting to have students explore that, like what isn't obvious even with their, let's say, their profile picture. I know one of my students had a toddler, and she was always talking about how her, you know, it was hard to get things done with a toddler running underneath her feet and stuff. And she would always post pictures, though, about her daughter. So that actually, as the course went on, became more and more obvious that she was definitely a doting mother. The other way that you can introduce the purpose of the course is to create a video. Again, it puts that face on the course a little bit more, helps you connect with the students. And that might be better for that student that just will learn a little bit more about the purpose of the course because they're seeing and they're hearing about it. I've left the closed caption on the screenshot so that you could see that although Dr. Rohde is talking about his purpose of his course, he's really talking about how it builds on other things and it focuses on something unique. And so I've left the closed captions on so you could see that that was exactly what he was talking about there. Amanda's asking if Collaborate creates captioning. It doesn't unless you work with the Disability Resource Center to have a captionist. It has the capability of having a captionist. So if that is a need that your student has, I would definitely reach out to the folks at the Disability Resource Center. What I would do with the recording that I would have of this workshop or that you had of a live session is I will actually upload it to YouTube, and I will use YouTube's captioning system so that it does end up having captioning behind it. Now, I don't use the auto caption because it can really mess things up. But if you come to our accessibility session or watch the recording for our accessibility session, we talk a little bit more about how YouTube can be used for, again, that captioning. What it does is you start watching your recording while you're in that transcribe mode, and you can type in what you're hearing, so basically what you said, and then when you start typing, it pauses, so it sort of lets you catch up, and then when you stop typing, it starts going again. So usually if I transcribe for my course, I'm doing something that's really short because that's a best practice, is not to do anything too long. And so I'll do a 5-minute recording, and it maybe takes me 10 minutes to transcribe it. So I hope that answers your question, Amanda. Great. Okay, so just another idea, you can do a video to describe the purpose of your course. This goes into maybe the student's purpose for taking the course or the student's goals for taking the course. And it's using the discussion board again. And you could ask them what their goals are for the course. Or in this case, in this example, I've used a course that a friend of mine teaches, and she asks 3 different questions and she allows them to choose to answer one. So maybe something that jumps out at them a little bit more or makes a little bit more sense to them. And so they can answer any of these 3 questions. Of course, they can also use the reflection journal in Blackboard. And so that's something that maybe is just shared between you and the student, and they're letting you know what their goals are for the course. In both of these situations, whether you're using the discussion board or the journal, it also helps you understand that if their goal for the course is really off base for what you think the course is going to help them with, you know that early on, and you can have a conversation with them about it, or you can tell them, okay, your goal is a little bit different than my goal, but here's how we can work together on it. So those are just a couple ideas. Again, I would ask that if you have any others on how you let the students know what the purpose and what the goals are of the course, I would love to hear about it. But I will kind of just move along with how you can let your students know what the structure and flow of the course are, or the navigation. And again, they're going to kind of see how the navigation unfolds as the course goes on, but we're talking about getting started. What are some really good ways to help them understand that flow and navigation of the course? And one is to provide them with a comprehensive schedule like the one that I have on the screen in front of us. And I'm going to give you a couple different options again for how you can create this comprehensive schedule for your students. And this is a table, and it's been broken down into units. So that's letting the students know right off the bat that this is broken into 7, 10, 16 units, however you would like to kind of break it up into chunks. It again lets them know what those meetings are. So if there's any date and time sensitive meetings, that's going to let them know where those meetings fall out. Your topics. It's always a good idea to just have those key terms in the topic so they understand what's going to be covered in each of those units, but also how they are going to kind of fold in together, what the process flow is going to be. And then this is an important one at the end here, the assignments and due dates. So I always add any of the due dates over here. The due dates are going to be added to each assignment. They will appear in the calendar, but this is just another way to let those students know what your due dates are. I think this is a good way too when they have a full course load to help them be able to plan overall when things are due, and how they maybe even relate to other courses. But I told you I was going to give you a couple different examples of how you could create comprehensive schedule. This one is a little bit more detailed. It has things in a different order, but basically what I'm trying to say is you don't have to necessarily use the exact table that I've shared before or this one. It's just more important that you are letting your students see really quickly, like a one-page, how the course is structured. And maybe it's something that they're going to pull up on a frequent basis just to kind of make sure that they're on the right track and getting the right things done. I pull out my course schedule sometimes just to remind myself where we are sort of in the process. Especially if you have, several courses, this is going to kind of remind you about ETT 511 and kind of focus you again. And just a couple ideas of how you can do a course schedule. You can also do a course tour. And in the way I've kind of showed a course tour here is actually creating a screencast. And just a quick lesson on what a screencast is. That is when you are using a screencasting tool, and it's basically showing a student almost in a movie format of where you're clicking on the screen. So they're not necessarily seeing your face, they're just seeing what you're clicking on the screen, and they're hearing your voice. So you can basically navigate around your course and create this course tour by using a screencasting tool. Honestly, the easiest one I like is through screencast.com, and there's a tool called the Jing, and it appears as a little bubble on the top of your screen, and you can just basically start clicking in your course and letting your students know how to get around, how to find the modules, how to find the assessments, and usually take 10 minutes or so to go through the course, and they can go through it at the beginning of the course. They can maybe even go back to it in module 2 or 3 if they're having difficulty. It also helps me to understand how I set up the navigation, and when I'm doing the course tour, if I'm fumbling around in the course tour, that probably means that I need to change up the navigation and make it a little bit simpler for students to find things. My next section is how to set expectations with your students so that they know how to meet your expectations. I usually have an information page. Sometimes I'll call it information, or I will call it course policies or something where the students know to find out what my policies are, what my expectations are. It's probably something that's in your syllabus, but I don't think it hurts to put it somewhere else. They, depending on how you have your syllabus set up, they might have to download it or something like that. So I add these course policies in as items in Blackboard. I would recommend that you add some of these. This is the late work policy. Again, it's my late work policy. It doesn't have to be yours. But again, just kind of stating it so that your students know what they are. Your incomplete policy is another good one to add in there. And then this one at the bottom here, your the NIU academic integrity policy. I think there's a variety of places they can find this policy, but by putting it sort of front and center here, you're saying that you are committed to academic integrity, and you will follow the consequences if students decide to stray from that. So again, just making them really clear and upfront. Another expectation is how you expect them to participate. And a little bit of this is something that you might expect them to do in a face-to-face, but I think this one is a little bit more explicit about how you expect them to participate in an online course. In this case, I have given participation a point value, but more importantly, I'm talking about how I expect them to interact with one another on the discussion boards. I also use blogs and have the students be able to comment on each other's blogs. So I want to make sure that they are doing these things in any way that they're interacting with each other in the course. I'm asking them also to demonstrate their understanding of something by backing up what they're saying with some of the course readings. I want them to be asking each other thoughtful questions. When I do discussion boards, I have them respond to 2 other people, which I think is pretty typical. But I also want them to respond with thought-provoking questions and in a challenging manner. So I'm letting them know in my expectations right up front that that's sort of what I'm looking for. If they are participating in a synchronous session, so a live session, I want them to also be civil and thoughtful with each other. But I also want them to be respectful of my time. So if they think they're going to miss a session, they need to notify me and arrange for some kind of backup activity. And that would be specific if an online session was required. This digs a little bit deeper into the etiquette specific to a discussion board. And so there's a lot of discussion board etiquette if you did a search for out there. Find one you like, maybe adapt it to your own situation. One of the ones that I kind of let go this fall, I have to say, is to require that they use descriptive subject lines. If they're all sort of all over the place with their descriptive subject lines, it can be really hard to sort of follow those discussion boards, especially when you grade. And that's where I think I let it slip a little bit this time. I really wish I had made them use names in the subject lines so that when I was going back and grading and they were replying to each other, it'd be easy to see who had sort of started that discussion thread. So I would definitely recommend that you let them know from the beginning that descriptive subject lines are important. Backing up their statements with whether they agree or disagree with somebody, that's again kind of fostering that that flow, that dialogue that can happen, and being respectful of each other. Even though I have them challenge each other a little bit, I want to make sure they challenge each other in a very respectful way. So those are some of my favorite etiquette expectations that I have. You also want to make sure that you are helping your students to be successful in some way. And so again, kind of a variety of ways you can do that. You can give them information on how they can be successful, and maybe that's talking a little bit more about what the course is all about. It could be a tips at the beginning of the course, or maybe let them know that there will be tips throughout the course that they should look for. We did talk about tips at the beginning of this workshop so that hopefully everybody closed their door to be free of distractions, or maybe put their notepad away because they realized that they were going to be able to watch the recording. Whatever the tips you can give to your students to be successful, any kind of aids that you can give them, even giving them more information about support that they can use. Let them know early so that they're not struggling and they know where to find that support. Let them know where to get started. We talked about making it your course entry page, but you could also be really obvious in your navigation, your left-hand navigation I've added up here at the top. Let them know there's a welcome and there's a start here. So if they do click on something different and then they want to go back to that start, they know exactly where to find it. let them know what technical requirements they might need for the beginning of throughout the course, but right at the beginning you want them to know so that they can meet those minimum technical requirements. If you do require them to have a speaker or a headphone because they're going to have to perhaps do a presentation or something like that, let them know what those minimal technical requirements are early in the course. And finally, not quite finally, but I told you I was going to explain a little bit about Quality Matters and how this all fits together. Quality Matters is the online course design standards that NIU has adopted. And this particular online workshop has really talked about general standard number 1, which is the getting students started. And so I'm going to wrap up everything that we've talked about this afternoon into sort of one big statement. Quality online courses help students understand the course, including the purpose, structure, policies, etiquette, and how to get started. We want to help the students feel connected to their instructor and classmates, and inform students of prerequisite knowledge, technical skills, and technological tools in order to be successful. So that's a lot about what we've talked about this afternoon. Every time I do this series, I always do the getting students started at the end. And even though it's general standard number 1, one of the reasons I like to do it at the end is because you sort of have to have everything else already done before you can do the getting started point. You can't do your course tour until you have all the navigation done. Now, I know a couple of you are starting in January with your online course. So you definitely want to work towards that, but just realize that there's going to be some more work that's going to need to go into it. And you will not be the first person to literally be designing the course about a week ahead of when your students are taking that. But of course, you want to try to avoid that. It would be less stressful for you. But I do want to share some of our favorite practices that just didn't quite fit into a category, but I thought I would still share them with you in the last few minutes of the workshop today. First of all is to create that entry point, change your entry point to be that welcome at least the first couple of weeks. You actually do that through customization teaching style. So let me know if you can't find that, because for some reason it's in a strange spot for me. Introduce the course purpose and structure. We talked a lot about that, so make sure you incorporate that into your favorite practice. Create a course tour. I actually did screencasting with my students. They had to create screencasts in my course. They loved it. Don't feel uncomfortable about doing a screencast for your course tour. It takes some practice, but then it's a lot of fun. Remember to introduce yourself in maybe a couple different ways. Maybe you're going to do a kind of an overall course introduction, and then you can also do it as a weekly introduction. Again, in a variety of different ways. Formal, more professional, introduce them to your blog or your professional society. There's a variety of ways that you can introduce yourself. Provide specific steps on how to get started. Put yourself back into that student perspective. It all may seem really obvious to you, but it's really obvious in your head. It may not be as obvious to your students when they get in there. And then provide ways for your students to interact with each other early. And this is my final tip of the day, and that is to consider doing what we call a 0 week, or a week 0. So before that first day of class, that first week of class, you are going to open up the course to your students a half a week early in order for them to be able to kind of move around in these getting started activities. Maybe have that first discussion board post where they're getting to know each other in that sort of 0 week, that week before, so that when the course does start, they're more focused on the content that you are providing with them and meeting all those expectations. They're not as bogged down on just trying to learn their way around the course. Now, will some of them not open up the course until week 1? Sure. But I think it's worth it to open it up as soon as you can in order for them to kind of work their way through these getting started activities before this sort of the real content starts happening. In summary, what we've talked about is how to help them connect with each other and letting them know that you care, helping them with the purpose and your goals and their goals of the course, helping them understand the structure and flow, setting your expectations for the students up early, and helping them to be successful in the course. It has been my pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. Again, my name is Tracy Miller and I'm the Online Teaching Coordinator. Here is some contact information if you have some questions, but of course I'll hang out too if anyone has any more questions this afternoon. Just add them to the text chat area and I'll be happy to answer them. I will turn off the recording at this point.